I spent almost 1,000 hours of my life playing otoma games, dating fictional 2D men while experiencing a deep narrative. Mindless entertainment? Or can story-driven games actually teach us about the world and especially relationships? All idealized passion and love stories? Or can dating fictional characters actually make us a better partner in real life? The most obvious benefits of reading fiction are a better vocabulary, improved memory, and concentration skills, and reduced feeling of stress. But can reading fiction, and thus reading visual novels like otoma games, also influence our social behavior or cognition? When reading a story about someone else, we start seeing the world through that person's eyes. Even more so if we tend to self-insert. The story helps us, and gradually we learn not to perceive the world as ourselves, but as the protagonist. And I would argue otoma games or visual novels in general enhance this process, as they are mostly written in the first-person perspective and might require us to self-insert even more when we have to make decisions to move the plot forward. With each decision we make in the game, we get transported more into its universe. And actually, that feeling of being emotionally transported into another world while reading a story moderates the effects the story has on us. The more we feel immersed, the more influenced we are. But what exactly happens to our social cognition when reading and experiencing a story from another's point of view? We practice to put ourselves in another's shoes. And that's the exact skill that is enhanced by reading fiction. Empathy. Frequent readers of fiction, hence also of visual novels, and I would argue even more so of romantic otoma games, which solely focus on others' emotions and understanding and connecting emotionally, score higher in empathy. That is true for self-assessment, but also when it comes to actual behavior. In an experiment, they let people either read a fictional text or the same text that was more written like a documentary, more neutral and in a non-fiction style. Afterwards, they had to leave the room and, coincidentally, meet someone on the floor who dropped a bunch of pens. How do you think they reacted? The ones that felt most transported into the story and felt the most empathy with the characters of that short story had a higher tendency to help the poor fellow on the floor pick up the pens. And this was regardless of how high they scored in empathy in general. The tendency only correlated with their feelings of transportation into a story. Because only a good fictional story can make you feel what others think, or feel almost directly as if that were your own thoughts. Readers of fiction can more easily identify emotions or assess social situations. Also in otoma games we have to derive by the dialogue and tone of the voice actor what the character is feeling. Does he like us? Is he hiding something? Which reaction would most please him, considering what I know about him so far? Looking closely, playing an interactive story-driven game, like visual novels or otoma games, we are constantly simulating social situations which we have to understand, relate to, and base our decisions on, just like we would in real life. And here we come to the main point. Playing visual novels lets us constantly simulate more or less real-life situations and practice understanding other characters and the situation. And that is one of the most powerful ways to learn social behavior. Why is this so powerful? A simulation imitates a real-world situation, but with some restrictions. A simulation, like every model, cannot display the full reality, but has to abstract the most important components. Simulations are simplified versions of the world. As much as we love our 2D characters and as fleshed out and interesting they can be, they are not as complex as a real person, but defined through distinct character traits to make their personality. And as much as that pains me to say, they are limited, they are simplified, they are stereotypes and tropes. Still, they can be deep and interesting, but for the purpose of this video, it's more noteworthy that they are simplified versions of real people, compressed to the most important character traits. That makes them easier to understand in a simulation, a scene in a game, already ripped off of unnecessary and distracting details, so the player can concentrate on what is really important about this character and situation. It was found out that when we construct a narrative about our own life, details are distorted 60% of the time. What stays more consistent though are abstract truths about the lessons we learned. Hence the abstraction in books and games help us convey the abstract truth about that situation. These simulations can even be used in medicine to treat trauma or allow people with social difficulties to practice understanding social cues. The next benefit that makes the gamified simulation of a social situation so powerful is the deeply immersive experience. As stated previously, the more immersively a story is written, the more you become part of it and identify with it. In video games, the aspect of interaction comes on top of this immersive storytelling. In contrast to a book, we can not only read, but make decisions ourselves, which highly increases the immersion and makes the simulation more realistic and personal. We not only witness others making decisions based on the situation and characters, we merely compare with our own judgment. In visual novels, we make these decisions ourselves. In games, we cannot rely on others to make decisions for us. That asks us to be even more attentive to details of the scenes, expressions and voices of the characters, and to complete the social puzzle all on our own. Compared to books, a game is more realistic, immersive, and makes the player responsible for their decisions. And these simulations of social situations then facilitate communication and understanding of social information. That also leads to an improved theory of mind. To puzzle a story together, we have to know who knows what, thinks what, likes what, without having direct access to this information. We must be able to see every fictional scenario from the perspective of each different character to be able to understand their reasoning and behavior. And this ability, to see the world through another person's mind and imagine they don't know something you do, that is the so-called theory of mind. Being able to differentiate between different states of mind of different people. You test this on children by showing them a hidden ball in a cupboard, then another character enters the scene and they have to tell you whether the new character knows where the ball is. Sounds too simple? But not even for adults it's always natural to use the theory of mind. For example, if I say, I hate that game, I hate that character. There might be people feeling offended because they think I say it's a bad game or an unlikable character in general, thereby neglecting the theory of mind, taking my states of mind into account. Maybe I say that because the game didn't have a Kisiji and that's the most important thing in the world to me. Or I couldn't connect to the character because he acts cold most of the time. So it turns out these statements would be true for me personally, but depending on other people's preferences and state of mind, they might be as well false. Whenever you discuss with someone, the other person will have their own prejudices and biases, and it helps knowing them or being able to imagine they might be different from yours. Then if I say, I didn't like the game, you could understand the game wasn't romantic enough. Or like Bay asked on Twitter, our preferences for abusive characters might correlate with our feelings of security in our childhood. Knowing that, you can then understand each statement of a person in the context of their mind or even personal history, meaning having a strong theory of mind enhances our mutual understanding. So, the more fiction you read, the more social simulations you play, the more emphatic you get, being able to understand others' emotions and mind, reading social situations as well in real life, as you have practically learned all these skills by experience. Simulating abstract forms of social situations in video games like visual novels or otome games. And these effects are significant over multiple studies in short-term as well as long-term effects. Which means reading fiction, playing social sims can change your personality to be more emphatic and understanding towards others over time and will have a lasting impact on your personality. Take care. That doesn't mean if you don't read fiction, you're a cold-hearted wretch. It's just that fiction and immersive narratives enhance your social skills. Might that be why the otome community is often described as warm and wholesome? Because we all surround ourselves with fictional interactions and therefore tend to have high empathy values and tend to be emotionally warm and understanding? I think that certainly is a possibility, though also a topic for another video. In very simple forms though, you can even practice by playing dating games how to behave on a date, how to approach someone, what would be a nice thing to say in this situation. I'm not surprised at all about some comments on my videos talking about how otome games help the players understand other people better or get dating experience in a safe space. But is this true for every story, every medium? Are books as good as games? Olympia Soirée as educational as Anna Karenina? And of course, not every story has the same educational value, but on the other hand, you cannot simply say only books and works of world literature can have positive effects on our emotional intelligence. Especially having some common prejudices about otome games in mind, I could imagine people saying that otome games only depict idealized versions of romantic love that are void of any similarity to reality. That might even harm their readers as they build up unrealistic expectations so they become unable to date real-life men. I guess we all have heard about these rumors, because cases where people decide to stick to their fictional crushes get vastly popular in media, of course. And the other 99.99% of players who just enjoy the games and don't mix them up with reality are completely disregarded. But more about prejudices about otome games in this video. For me, it is out of the question that otome games and visual novels in general can tell compelling and meaningful stories. Did you notice? Did you use your theory of mind? I have a channel about otome games. Chances are I like them. A lot. I have a mental bias towards otome games, knowing that you should take my statement with a grain of salt. But I would also say there are otome games of higher and lesser quality. And it's true that stories can also teach us wrong knowledge or a distorted understanding of the world. So just like in other mediums or books, there are some games I would deem as better social simulations than others. The point is that every medium in principle is able to create a deep narrative with multidimensional characters, which then enhances our emotional intelligence. But at the same time, there are forms of entertainment, be it books, movies or games, that don't engage us cognitively or paint a distorted picture of the world. You could argue that games are less cognitively demanding as you have visuals and sounds, but nevertheless, visual novels require us to imagine a lot of what is happening in our mind. And even movies, you are in theory only passively watching, can tell compelling stories and introduce us to characters we won't easily forget and who might influence the way we think. So it's not the medium that's important, but the complexity of the story and subtlety and ambiguity in acting that leaves room for imagination and leaves the player to figure out what lies between the lines. Knowing how our personality influences the games we like, and the other way around, we just might want to think about which games we allow to influence our cognition. But of course, there's nothing wrong with just playing games to have fun and relax. It is just noteworthy, I think, how much contact with basically any form of art can change our personality, enhance personal growth, and even change how we see ourselves in every line we read. To finally answer the question, can playing games make you a better person, a better partner, change the way you think? And the clear answer is yes, they can. Depending on which games you play and which skills they require, they influence our way of thinking and which skills we improve. Just like people who play shooters have immensely good visual skills and reaction times, people who play games which are based on social interactions practice every time they play how to empathize with people and understand social cues, which in general makes them more understanding, empathic, and socially supportive. And these skills might certainly change the way you behave in a relationship. And this is only one aspect of how otome games and narratives affect us positively. They can also reduce prejudices or improve our mental health. But how video games can cure us, I will discuss in another video. So please for now continue playing otome games, like the video or leave a social support sub to make more people aware of the magic of otome games. Enjoy husbandos and the side effect of also becoming a better human being, just by playing the games you love.